The community center in Silver Creek, Colorado, was filled beyond capacity on that bitter winter night. Snow clung to boots and melted into dark puddles on the linoleum floor. The air smelled of damp coats, burnt coffee, and quiet fear. Folding chairs scraped softly as people shifted, unwilling to sit still, unwilling to admit what 3 days without answers really meant. 72 hours. That was how long Ethan Miller, 7 years old, had been missing. At the front of the room stood Officer Ryan Miller, his uniform neat, his posture controlled, his face carved from exhaustion. To most of the town, he was the police chief, the man trained to stay calm, to follow procedure, to lead when things went wrong. But tonight, beneath the badge and the radio clipped to his shoulder, he was simply a father trying not to fall apart in public. Search teams had done everything by the book. Grid patterns, thermal drones, volunteers combing the tree line until their hands went numb. Nothing. The mountains surrounding Silver Creek had swallowed Ethan whole. Dense forest, steep ravines, and night temperatures dipping well below freezing. A child that young, with only a light jacket. No one said it out loud. They didn't have to. Ryan listened as the search coordinator explained the next steps. Expanded radius, additional resources, overnight shelters for volunteers. The words floated past him like static. All he could see was Ethan's smile from the missing poster taped behind the podium. The same smile Ryan saw every morning taped to his refrigerator, right next to overdue utility bills and a flyer for affordable family health coverage he'd meant to read. He nodded when people spoke to him, thanked them when they offered help, accepted casseroles he knew he wouldn't eat. This was what responsibility looked like. This was what leadership demanded. But inside, something was breaking. At the back of the room, nearly invisible among the adults, sat Lucy Carter, 9 years old, her boots dangling above the floor. She didn't fidget like the other kids. She watched, carefully. Beside her lay a gray pit bull, muscles relaxed, but alert. Head resting between its paws. The dog's name was Ash. Dogs weren't usually allowed inside the community center, but no one had the heart or the energy to argue. Ash's eyes tracked the room, pausing often on the large photo of Ethan projected against the far wall. His ears twitched. His nose worked quietly, pulling in information no one else could sense. Lucy noticed. When the meeting broke up, the room filled with low voices and forced optimism. Volunteers signed clipboards. Someone cried softly near the exit. Ryan moved toward the door, shaking hands, thanking people, doing his job. That was when Lucy stood. She walked toward him slowly. Ash rose at her side, without a sound. The chatter around them faded, not because anyone meant it to, but because something about the moment demanded attention. Ryan glanced down, expecting another well-meaning comment. Instead, he saw a child's face. Serious, steady, unblinking. "My dog can find your son," Lucy said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room went silent. Ryan blinked, certain he'd misheard. He looked past her, toward a woman rushing forward. Lucy's mother, Karen Carter, still in scrubs from her shift at the clinic. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "She doesn't always—" "Lucy, honey, this isn't—" "My dog can find him," Lucy repeated, just as calmly. "Ash knows his smell." Ryan felt the words hit him, harder than he expected. He should have smiled politely. He should have thanked her and moved on. He had heard hope dressed up in 100 different ways, and every time, it had led nowhere. But something stopped him. Ash was sitting perfectly still now, eyes fixed on the image of Ethan, not panting, not whining, just watching, as if waiting for permission. Ryan cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" Lucy met his gaze, without hesitation. "My pit bull can find your son." And for the first time in 72 hours, Ryan Miller felt a crack form in the wall he'd built around himself. Small, dangerous, impossible to ignore. "My pit bull can find your son." The sentence hung in the air, long after Lucy finished saying it. No one laughed. No one spoke. It was the kind of silence that felt accidental at first, then deliberate, like the room itself was deciding what to do with her words. Ryan straightened, instinctively slipping back into the role he knew how to perform. He gave a small, careful nod, the same one he'd used dozens of times that week. "That's very kind of you," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "But we have trained search and rescue teams working on this." Lucy didn't move. She didn't argue either. She simply watched him, her expression unchanged, as if she were waiting for him to finish something he hadn't said yet. Karen reached them then. She placed a hand on Lucy's shoulder. "Officer Miller, I'm really sorry," she said quickly. "Lucy doesn't always understand situations like this. She's very literal. We didn't mean to interrupt." Ryan waved it off politely. No harm done. He'd learned that tone over years of community meetings and domestic calls. Calm, reassuring, final. Lucy shifted slightly, stepping closer. "Ash isn't guessing," she said. "He's been smelling the pictures. He knows your son's scent." A few people nearby exchanged looks. Someone let out a quiet sigh. Pit bull. The word alone carried weight in Silver Creek. Too many headlines. Too many assumptions. Ryan felt the familiar pressure of eyes on him now, waiting to see how he'd handle it, waiting for him to shut this down. "Ash isn't a certified K9, is he?" Ryan asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Lucy said, "but he's good at finding people." Karen's grip tightened. "Lucy," she whispered, "please." Lucy ignored her. Ash sat at her side, posture calm, but intent. His gaze flicked between Ryan and the photograph behind him. His ears tilted forward, catching sounds beneath the surface of the room. Boots shifting, breath hitching. the faint hum of the overhead lights. Ryan swallowed. "I appreciate the offer," he said carefully. "Really. But right now, we need to stick with professionals." Lucy tilted her head, considering this. "The professionals haven't found him," she said. "Not accusatory, just factual." The words landed harder than anything else had that night. Karen flushed. "She didn't mean—" "It's okay," Ryan interrupted, though his chest felt tight. He knew the statistics. He knew the cold. He knew what 3 nights outside could do to a child's body. Lucy's voice softened. "Ethan is scared," she said. "Ash can help him." Ryan closed his eyes for a brief second, longer than he meant to. He should end this. Thank them again. Walk away. That was the safe choice, the correct one, the one his training demanded. But when he opened his eyes, he saw something he couldn't unsee. Ash had stood up. The dog wasn't pulling. He wasn't barking. He simply rose to all fours, his body angled subtly toward Ryan, tail still, muscles quiet, but ready. His nose lifted, drawing in the air, as if the room itself were telling him a story. Ryan felt a chill run up his spine, and it had nothing to do with the weather outside. "Why are you here tonight?" Ryan asked suddenly. Karen hesitated. "Lucy didn't want to stay home," she said. She said Ash was restless." Lucy nodded. "He's been like that since yesterday," she added. "Since they put Ethan's picture online." Ryan glanced back at the projection screen. Ethan's smiling face looked impossibly warm against the stark white wall. For a moment, he imagined that smile fading. In the cold, in the dark, somewhere out there. "I'm sorry," Ryan said quietly. "What's your name?" "Lucy Carter." "And your dog?" "Ash." Ryan nodded slowly. "Lucy," he said, "you need to understand this is dangerous. The mountains don't forgive mistakes." Lucy met his eyes. "Ash doesn't make them." Karen inhaled sharply. "Officer, please." But Ryan wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at Ash, at the way the dog's attention never wavered, at the calm certainty in his stance. He thought of every lead that had gone nowhere, every night Ethan hadn't come home, every rule that hadn't brought his son back. Ryan turned away, taking 2 steps toward the door. For a moment, Lucy's face fell. Then he stopped. He didn't turn around right away. When he finally did, his voice was low, time 500 mavsums, almost to himself. "Hypothetically," he said, "if I wanted to understand what your dog can do, where would we start?" Karen's breath caught. Lucy's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with relief. And Ash let out a single, quiet huff, as if the question itself had been the answer he was waiting for. Ryan followed Karen and Lucy outside into the cold, the door closing behind them with a dull thud that seemed louder than it should have. Snow fell steadily now, soft, but relentless, coating the empty parking lot in white. Ash walked between them. The leash was loose. He moved with an easy confidence that didn't match the tension in the air. They stopped beneath a flickering streetlight. Karen hugged her coat tighter around herself. "Officer Miller," she said quietly, "I need to be very clear. Ash is not a certified search dog. If this puts you in a difficult position, we can stop right now." Ryan nodded. He appreciated her honesty. He also appreciated that she hadn't pulled Lucy away the moment he asked questions. Most people would have. "I just want to understand," he said. "That's all." Lucy knelt beside Ash, pressing her forehead briefly against the dog's neck. The gesture wasn't dramatic. It was habitual. Grounding. Something she'd done 1,000 times before. Ash remained still, breathing slow, his eyes scanning the tree line beyond the lot, as if the meeting inside had already ended for him. "He wasn't always ours," Karen began. "We found him 2 years ago, chained behind an abandoned trailer outside town. Someone reported him as aggressive. Animal control was going to put him down." Ryan glanced at the dog. Ash's ears twitched at the sound of a passing truck, but otherwise he didn't react. "Lucy sat down in front of him," Karen continued, "right on the frozen ground. Everyone told her not to. Said pit bulls were unpredictable." She swallowed. Ash just lay down, put his head in her lap, like he'd been waiting. Lucy looked up at Ryan. "He was scared," she said simply. "Not mean." Ryan felt something tighten in his chest. He'd seen fear turn into violence more times than he could count. On the job, in courtrooms, in the eyes of people who didn't trust him either. He understood how easily labels replaced listening. "My husband trained him," Karen went on. "Mark Carter. He was a wilderness rescue volunteer, not law enforcement, but he knew tracking. He believed any dog with the right nose and focus could learn the basics." "Before he passed?" Ryan asked. Karen nodded. "Snowslide. Up near Granite Ridge." Her voice steadied with effort. "After that, Ash stayed with Lucy. He changed, became more attentive, like he'd decided his job was her." Lucy stroked Ash's head. The dog leaned subtly into her hand, eyes half-lidded, content, but alert. "He's found people before," Karen said. "Nothing official. A neighbor with dementia who wandered off. An injured hiker who missed a turn and panicked. We didn't call the news. We just helped them home." Ryan exhaled slowly. He could already hear the arguments in his head. Liability. Chain of command. Public perception. Pit bull. Child handler. Everything about this was wrong on paper, but paper hadn't brought Ethan back. Inside the community center, the search coordinator stepped out, pulling his jacket on. He stopped when he saw them. "Ryan," he said, concern sharpening his tone, "we need to talk." "In a minute," Ryan replied. The man glanced at Ash, then Lucy. His jaw tightened. This isn't appropriate. I know, Ryan said. Then why? Because I'm running out of options, Ryan interrupted, more sharply than he intended. The coordinator hesitated, clearly weighing whether to push further. After a moment, he shook his head and walked away, boots crunching through the snow. Karen watched him go. You don't have to do this, she said again. Ryan looked down at Lucy. You said Ash knows Ethan's scent. Lucy nodded. He's been smelling the pictures. Phones, screens. They hold scent longer than people think, especially if you're looking for it. Ryan blinked. That wasn't something a 9-year-old was supposed to know. And if I said yes, he asked. If we tried? Lucy's eyes didn't waver. Then we need something Ethan wore, not washed. Ryan thought of the blue sweater folded on Ethan's bed. He'd avoided that room since the first night. Avoided touching anything that still smelled like his son. Karen seemed to read his hesitation. If this doesn't work, she said gently, we stop. Immediately. Ryan nodded. And we do this quietly, he added. No crowd, no promises. Lucy smiled. Not wide, not excited. Just a small, certain curve of her lips. Ash doesn't like crowds, she said. They get in the way. Ash lifted his head at the sound of his name, tail giving a single, slow wag. Ryan straightened, feeling the weight of the decision settle into his bones. He knew exactly how this could end, for his career, for his reputation, for everything he'd built. He also knew how it could end, if he walked away. Give me 30 minutes, he said. I'll get the sweater. As he turned back toward his truck, Ash stepped forward, nose lifting to the wind, body angling toward the dark edge of the forest beyond town. Lucy noticed immediately. He's ready, she said softly. Ryan paused, following the line of the dog's gaze into the trees. Somewhere out there, his son was alone in the cold, and for the first time since Ethan disappeared, Ryan felt something dangerously close to hope. Ryan drove through Silver Creek with the headlights low, snow ticking softly against the windshield. The town felt hollow at this hour, as if everyone were holding their breath at the same time. He parked in front of his house but didn't get out right away. The porch light was still on. He couldn't remember the last time he'd turned it off. Inside, the house was silent in a way that hurt. Too clean. Too still. Ryan moved slowly, careful not to rush past the details he'd been avoiding for 3 days. Ethan's backpack hung on the chair by the door. A pair of small boots sat crooked near the mat. One tipped on its side. Ryan swallowed and forced himself forward. Ethan's bedroom door was half open. The smell hit him first. Not just laundry detergent, but something warmer. Crayons, grass, the faint sweetness of a child who still believed the world was mostly safe. Ryan stood there longer than he should have, his hand gripping the door frame until his knuckles whitened. He found the sweater folded at the foot of the bed, the blue one Ethan had worn the day he disappeared. Ryan lifted it carefully, like it might fall apart if he moved too fast. For a moment, his resolve wavered. This was reckless, unprofessional. He could hear the voices already. Superiors, reporters, people who had never lost anything that mattered. But then he remembered Ethan's voice, light and trusting, asking him weeks earlier, "Dad, if I ever got lost, would you find me?" Ryan exhaled and pressed the sweater to his chest. Back at the edge of town, Karen and Lucy waited near Ryan's truck. Ash sat between them, posture calm, eyes fixed on the dark line of trees beyond the road. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the sharp bite of mountain cold. Somewhere far off, a generator hummed. Ryan stepped out and held up the sweater. Lucy's eyes softened, just a little. "That's good," she said. "He wore it a lot." Ryan nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He handed it to her, then hesitated. "Before we do this," he said quietly, "there are conditions." Karen straightened. "Of course." "I go with you," Ryan said. "We stay in radio range as long as possible. If conditions get dangerous, we stop. No arguments." Lucy considered this seriously. Then she nodded. "Okay." Ryan added, "And if this turns into a circus, if people show up, cameras, anyone, we walk away." Ash shifted his weight, as if sensing the tension. Lucy knelt and held the sweater out to him. "This is Ethan," she said softly. "He's cold. He's scared. Can you help him?" Ash buried his nose into the fabric. Everything about the dog changed. His body went rigid, muscles taut with focus, breath slow and deliberate. Ryan watched, heart pounding, as Ash inhaled deeply, again and again, cataloging something invisible, time 300 to human senses. Then Ash lifted his head and let out a low, purposeful sound, not a bark, not a whine. Lucy smiled. "He's got it," she said. "He knows." Ryan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He radioed the search coordinator, choosing his words carefully. "I'm following a lead," he said. "I'll check back in 30 minutes." The response was immediate and angry. Objections, protocol, warnings. Ryan acknowledged them all and ended the call. He slipped the radio back onto his belt and looked at Lucy. "Where do we start?" he asked. Lucy pointed toward the edge of town, where Ethan was last seen. They drove in silence to the Miller house on the outskirts, the forest looming dark and endless beyond the backyard fence. Snow had already softened the tracks from days before, erasing the obvious paths, hiding mistakes. Lucy handed the sweater back to Ash and unclipped his leash. "Work," she whispered. Ash moved forward, nose to the ground, circling slowly at first. This wasn't random wandering. Ryan recognized method when he saw it. Ash checked one area, then another, eliminating old scents, ignoring distractions. Lucy watched every shift in his posture, every pause. "He's looking for the freshest trail," she murmured. After several minutes, Ash stopped. His head lifted, his body angled decisively toward the trees. Lucy's breath caught. "There," she said. "That's it." Ryan followed Ash's line of sight into the forest, his stomach tightening. Time 1200 mounds. The official searches had focused elsewhere. Safer ground, easier terrain. This direction led straight into steep ravines and thick timber. "You're sure?" Ryan asked. Lucy nodded once. "He wouldn't pull that way if he wasn't." Ash took a step forward, then another, glancing back as if checking whether they were coming. Snow began to fall harder, thick flakes blurring the boundary between town and wilderness. Ryan adjusted his coat, tightened his gloves, and stepped past the fence. As he crossed into the forest, behind a pit bull and a 9-year-old girl, Ryan Miller knew, whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the way things were. Do you think Ryan made the right choice by trusting Lucy and Ash? Comment 1 for yes, 2 for no, or 3 for not sure. But I'd do the same. Ash crossed the fence first, disappearing into the trees with a quiet certainty that made Ryan hesitate only a fraction of a second before following. The snow swallowed sound almost immediately. Behind them, the town lights dulled to a weak glow, then vanished altogether. Ahead, the forest rose like a wall, dark trunks, tangled undergrowth, and a cold that pressed in from every direction. Ryan switched on his flashlight, keeping the beam low. He didn't want to blind the dog or flood the woods with light that could ruin their night vision. Ash moved steadily, nose skimming the ground, tail held level, not rushing, not stopping, just working. Lucy walked a step behind him, her boots sinking deep with each stride. She watched Ash's shoulders more than his head, reading the tension there the way some people read maps. The first 10 minutes passed without a word. Ryan listened to the crunch of snow, the rasp of his own breathing inside his scarf, the soft jingle of the radio against his chest. He felt exposed out here. No backup close enough to matter. No clear plan he could explain if things went wrong. This was not how searches were supposed to happen. This was not how command decisions were supposed to be made. Ash paused. Ryan froze instantly, hand lifting in a reflex he'd learned years ago. The dog circled once, twice, then changed direction by a few degrees, and continued on. More focused than before. "He's checking old scent," Lucy said quietly. "It's fading. He's sorting through it." Ryan nodded, even though she wasn't looking at him. He'd spent his career trusting data, procedure, and technology. GPS grids, emergency response protocols, equipment funded through county budgets and public safety grants. What he was watching now didn't fit any of that. And yet, it made an unsettling kind of sense. The forest thickened as they went. Branches brushed Ryan's shoulders, dropping snow down the back of his collar. The terrain sloped upward, then sharply down. He slipped once, catching himself on a tree, heart pounding. Lucy didn't comment. Ash didn't even glance back. He knew they were there, The radio crackled faintly. "Ryan, copy?" The search coordinator's voice was thin and distorted. Ryan hesitated, then pressed the button. "I'm moving," he said, still following the lead. There was a pause. "Weather's getting worse. Forecast says heavy snowfall within the hour." "I know," Ryan replied. He didn't add what he was thinking. That turning back now would mean abandoning the only direction that hadn't failed yet. Ash suddenly slowed. His head lifted higher. His pace changed. It wasn't frantic, but it was more urgent, as if the trail had sharpened. Lucy's breath caught. "He's closer," she said. "See how his steps tighten?" Ryan watched carefully. Ash no longer circled. He moved in a straighter line, weaving through trees with practiced ease, choosing paths that looked impossible until the dog made them obvious. Snow began falling harder, thick flakes swirling in the beam of Ryan's light. Visibility dropped fast. "Lucy," Ryan said quietly, "how long can he do this?" Lucy didn't hesitate. "As long as he needs to." Ash pulled slightly ahead now, his muscles engaged, claws biting into the snow. Ryan's lungs burned. His legs ached. He thought about Ethan. Small, exhausted, scared. Somewhere in this endless white. He thought about how quickly hypothermia could set in. How thin the line was between still alive and too late. He pushed harder. Then Ash stopped. Completely. The sudden stillness made Ryan's heart slam into his ribs. The dog's head lifted, ears forward, body angled toward a stand of rocks half buried in snow. His breath steamed in the cold air. Lucy stepped up beside him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He's got something." Ryan scanned the area, flashlight cutting across stone and shadow. "We searched near here," he said, doubt creeping in despite himself. 2 days ago." Ash let out a sharp bark. It echoed off the rocks, urgent, insistent, nothing like the low sounds he'd made before. He lunged forward, stopping at the base of a rocky outcrop where snow had drifted thickly against the stone. Lucy's face went pale. "That's his alert," she said. "That's not tracking anymore." Ryan's pulse roared in his ears. "Alert for what?" Lucy swallowed. "For source." Ryan moved closer, sweeping the flashlight upward. The beam caught on a narrow gap between the rocks, partially hidden by fallen branches and ice. His breath hitched. Inside the crevice, something moved. "Ethan," Ryan breathed, already climbing, snow and fear forgotten. Ash stood at the base, barking again, calling them in, holding the moment open. Lucy stayed close, eyes locked on the space Ryan had disappeared into, her hands clenched in her sleeves. The forest fell silent, as if even the storm was waiting. Ryan's boots sank deep as he climbed past the rocky outcrop, his flashlight cutting frantic lines through the falling snow. For one terrifying second, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, that the movement he'd seen was only shadow and hope colliding. Then the wind shifted, and he heard it. A sound, small, fragile, Not a cry, more like a breath that didn't have the strength to become one. "Ethan," Ryan called, his voice breaking despite every instinct telling him to stay calm. "Buddy, it's Dad. I'm right here." The sound came again, barely there. Ryan forced himself to slow down. Panic would get him hurt. Or worse, get someone else hurt. He shifted his weight carefully, testing each foothold. The crevice narrowed as he climbed, rock cold and slick under his gloves. Snow blew sideways now, driven by gusts that howled through the trees like something alive. Below him, ash barked once more, sharp, deliberate, not frantic, not aggressive. It wasn't a warning. It was confirmation. Lucy stood just behind the rocks, her small figure steady against the storm. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She watched Ash, reading him the way she always did. When the dog went quiet, she knew why. "He's not done yet," she called up. "Ethan moved. The scent shifts." Ryan froze. "Moved where?" Lucy took a step forward, then stopped herself. "Down," she said. "Ash says the trail doesn't end there. It bends." Ryan felt his stomach drop. If Ethan had crawled or slid deeper into the rocks, the risk just multiplied. Hypothermia, injury, collapse. Every emergency response scenario he'd ever studied ran through his mind at once. He backed down carefully, heart pounding. When his boots hit solid ground, Ash was already moving again, circling the rocks, nose pressed low, tail rigid. He ignored the crevice entirely now, angling instead toward a slope that dropped sharply away from the clearing. "That area wasn't in the grid," Ryan muttered. "No," Lucy said quietly. "It's why they missed him." The slope fell away into dense timber, the kind of terrain search teams avoided when time and weather were working against them. Steep, uneven, dangerous. On paper, it didn't make sense. On paper. Ryan keyed his radio. Static answered. He tried again, adjusting the angle. Nothing. Just a faint hiss. The storm had swallowed the signal. "Radio's out," he said. Lucy nodded, as if she'd expected it. "Ash doesn't need it." Ryan almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he tightened the strap on his pack and followed. Ash descended the slope with practiced ease, zigzagging, adjusting constantly, recalibrating with every shift of wind and snow. This wasn't instinct alone. This was work. Branches snapped underfoot. Time 9 hums. Ryan slipped twice, barely catching himself on frozen roots. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. The cold seeped through every layer, biting down hard. He wondered how Ethan's body was holding up, how much longer a child could survive like this. "Lucy," he said between breaths, "you need to tell me if this gets too much." She didn't look back. "It's already too much," she said. "That's why we're still going." Ash suddenly veered left. then stopped short. His head snapped up, ears forward, nostrils flaring. The change was immediate, unmistakable. Tracking ended. Something else took over. Lucy's breath hitched. "That's close," she whispered. "Really close." Ryan felt his pulse in his throat. He swept the flashlight across the slope, catching on tangled branches and snow-packed brush. At first, he saw nothing. Then, he saw it. The way the snow dipped, unnaturally, as if something had passed through it recently. Ash lunged forward, barking urgently now, paws tearing at the snow near a cluster of rocks half hidden by brush. He stopped, looked back at Lucy, tail stiff, eyes bright. "That's him," Lucy said, her voice shaking for the first time. "He's right there." Ryan dropped to his knees, digging with his hands, ignoring the cold burning through his gloves. Snow flew, branches cracked. His flashlight slipped, bounced, then steadied again. And then, time was 900 ms. He saw it, a small patch of blue fabric beneath the snow. "Ethan!" Ryan shouted, tearing the snow away with renewed desperation. Ash barked again, louder this time, standing guard just inches away, his body positioned between the child and the storm, as if he'd known exactly where to be all along. Ryan's hands shook as he cleared the last of the snow. Ethan lay curled against the rocks, eyes closed, lips tinged blue, chest rising so faintly it was almost invisible. "Dad," Ethan whispered. The word shattered Ryan completely. He gathered his son into his arms, pulling him close, wrapping his own coat around the small, freezing body. "I've got you," he choked. "I've got you. You're safe. You're safe." Ash stepped closer, sniffing Ethan carefully, then looked up at Lucy. His tail moved once, just once. Lucy sank to her knees in the snow, tears freezing on her lashes. "He found him," she whispered. "I told them." Ryan pressed his forehead against Ethan's, breath ragged, the storm roaring around them. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thumped through the weather. But Ryan knew the truth. They hadn't been saved by technology, or maps, or procedure. They had been saved by a dog no one wanted to trust, and a child no one thought to listen to. Ryan didn't think. He acted. Training took over where fear threatened to paralyze him. He checked Ethan's airway first. Clear, breathing, shallow, uneven. But there, pulse, weak, fluttering, like it might vanish if he pressed too hard. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, possibly a concussion. Ryan had seen this before in rescue scenarios, but never with his own child cradled against his chest. "Stay with me, buddy," Ryan whispered, his voice low and steady, even as his hands shook. "You're doing great. Just keep breathing." Ethan's eyelids fluttered, His lips parted, but no sound came out. His small body was frighteningly light, as if the cold had already begun to take pieces of him away. Ryan stripped off his outer coat, wrapped it tightly around Ethan, then pulled the emergency thermal blanket from his pack. The thin foil crackled loudly in the wind as he tucked it around his son, sealing in what little heat remained. "Lucy," Ryan said, forcing his voice to stay calm, "I need you to stay right there." Lucy nodded. Tears streaked her cheeks, freezing instantly in the bitter air. She held Ash's collar with both hands, anchoring herself. As much as the dog anchored her, Ash stood alert, body angled into the wind, blocking it where he could, his broad frame forming a living shield. Ryan grabbed his radio again, climbing a few steps up the slope, lifting it high above his head. "Search command, this is Miller," he said sharply. "I have my son. Repeat, I have Ethan. Severe hypothermia. Coordinates coming now." Static answered. Ryan swore under his breath and tried again, changing position, adjusting the angle, stepping onto a rock slick with ice. This time, a voice cut through, broken, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Copy. Say again." "I have him," Ryan shouted. "I need med evac now." The response came clearer. "Coordinates?" Ryan rattled them off. Every number burned into his memory. He heard movement on the other end. Voices, urgency, commands being relayed. The sound of the helicopter grew louder, closer, fighting the storm. Ryan climbed back down to Ethan, kneeling beside him once more. He checked his son's breathing again, rubbing Ethan's arms gently, stimulating circulation without shocking his system. Ethan let out a faint sound, a whimper that felt like a miracle. "That's it," Ryan said softly. "I hear you. I'm right here." Ash shifted closer, lowering himself beside Ethan's legs, radiating warmth. Ryan noticed it without fully processing it, noticed how the dog positioned himself, pressing close, but not crowding, offering heat without agitation. Lucy watched everything, silent now. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry out. She trusted Ash, and she trusted Ryan. Time sa. Her hands trembled, but she didn't let go. Minutes stretched impossibly long. The storm worsened, snow slashing sideways, visibility shrinking to nothing. Ryan worried about frostbite, about shock, about how fragile Ethan felt in his arms. Then, the sound changed. The helicopter's rotors cut through the wind, close enough now to vibrate the ground beneath them. A spotlight pierced the darkness, sweeping across the slope, then locking onto them. "Here!" Ryan shouted, waving one arm. The rescue team moved fast. Ropes, harnesses, gloved hands reaching out. A medic knelt immediately, checking Ethan with practiced efficiency. "He's alive," the medic said, loud enough to cut through the noise. "Barely, but he's alive. You found him just in time." Just in time. The words hit Ryan harder than anything else that night. They secured Ethan first, lifting him carefully into the harness. As the team prepared to move, Ryan felt something tug at his sleeve. Lucy stood there, Ash pressed against her side. "He did it," she said, her voice small but steady. "Ash found him." Ryan looked at the dog, snow-covered, calm, eyes still alert despite the chaos. He reached out without thinking and placed a hand on Ash's head. "Yes," Ryan said, his voice thick. "He did." Ash's tail moved once. The helicopter lifted Ethan into the night sky, carrying him toward warmth, time 1600, toward survival. Ryan followed moments later, clipped in, heart still racing, as the forest dropped away beneath them. Below, Lucy stood alone in the snow with Ash, watching until the light disappeared. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just knew. And as Silver Creek slept uneasily beneath the storm, the truth settled quietly into the mountains. The child had been found, not by procedure, not by authority, but by trust, instinct, and a dog everyone had underestimated. The helicopter cut through the storm like a wounded animal, metal shuddering as wind battered its sides. Ryan kept his eyes on Ethan the entire time, strapped to the stretcher, wrapped in foil and blankets, small chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven rhythms. Every breath felt borrowed. Every second felt too loud. The medic worked quickly, voice steady over the roar of the rotors. Core temperatures dangerously low. We're pushing warm IV fluids. Oxygen's on. Stay with me, kid. His gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency, the kind that came from years of emergency medical care in places where help arrived late, or not at all. Ryan nodded when spoken to, answered questions when he could. Time blurred into a series of flashing lights and clipped commands. He felt useless now, no longer searching, no longer choosing paths. Just waiting. Waiting was harder than the mountains. When the helicopter touched down at the regional hospital, order snapped back into place. Doors flew open. Cold gave way to harsh fluorescent light. Ethan was rushed down a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and overheated air. Ryan followed until a nurse gently, but firmly, stopped him. "We'll take it from here," she said. "You can wait just outside." Ryan stood there, hands empty for the first time since he'd lifted his son from the snow. His fingers still felt curved, as if Ethan's shape were burned into them. He leaned against the wall, head bowed, breath coming fast and uneven. A doctor approached, flipping through a chart. "Officer Miller," she said, "your son is alive. That matters. But the next few hours are critical." Critical. Ryan nodded again. He had learned that word's weight the hard way. "Do whatever you need," he said. "Whatever it costs." She gave him a look that mixed reassurance with realism. "Right now, we focus on stabilizing him. Worry about medical bills and health insurance later." Ryan almost laughed at that. Later felt like a foreign country. Hours passed. Snow piled against the hospital windows. Machines beeped steadily behind closed doors. Ryan sat hunched in a plastic chair, jacket still wet, boots leaving slush on the tile. A volunteer brought coffee. He didn't touch it. A chaplain offered quiet words. He barely heard them. He replayed the night in fragments. The crevice, Ash's bark, Lucy's voice steady in the chaos. He wondered how close they'd come to missing Ethan entirely. How many minutes, maybe seconds, stood between this waiting room and something unthinkable. Near dawn, the doors finally opened. The doctor stepped out, fatigue lining her face. "He's stable," she said. "Hypothermia, dehydration, mild frostbite. No major head trauma. He's young." That helped. Ryan's knees nearly buckled. He pressed a hand to the wall to steady himself. "Can I see him?" She nodded. Briefly. Ethan lay small and pale in the hospital bed. Wires and tubes, framing his face. But he was breathing more evenly now. His lashes fluttered when Ryan touched his hand. "Dad?" Ethan whispered. Ryan leaned close, voice breaking. "I'm here, buddy. You're safe." Tears slid down Ethan's temples, disappearing into the pillow. "The dog," he murmured. "The gray dog." Ryan smiled through his tears. "Yeah," he said softly. "He found you." By the time the sun rose over Silver Creek, the story had already begun to spread. Phones buzzed. News vans idled outside the hospital. Headlines formed faster than facts ever did. Pitbull leads rescue. Police chief breaks protocol. Child found after 3 days missing. Ryan ignored them all. He stood by Ethan's bedside until visiting hours ended, then stepped into the hallway where Karen and Lucy waited. Lucy looked impossibly small beneath the hospital lights. Ash lying quietly at her feet, unfazed by the attention around him. "He's alive," Ryan said. Lucy closed her eyes, relief washing over her face. She knelt and hugged Ash's neck, burying her face in his fur. The dog stayed still, solid, as if he understood. The work wasn't finished, but it had mattered. Ryan crouched in front of them. "You saved my son," he said, the words heavy and precise. "Both of you." Lucy shook her head. "Ash did." Ryan looked at the dog, then back at the child. "He couldn't have done it without you." Ash lifted his head, eyes calm, tail moving once. Outside. Silver Creek woke to a different kind of morning. One filled with relief, questions, and a truth the town wasn't ready to face yet. The rescue was over. The consequences were just beginning. Morning settled over Silver Creek like a cautious truce. Snow still fell, softer now, as if the storm had spent its anger and left only quiet behind. Outside the hospital, headlights cut through the gray as news vans idled, their logos bright against the cold. Word had traveled fast, faster than facts ever did. Inside, Ryan stood at the window of Ethan's room, watching his son sleep. The monitors hummed a steady rhythm, each beep a small promise. The doctor had said the words that mattered most. He'll recover. And everything else had faded into background noise. Ethan stirred, eyes opening just enough to find his father. "Dad," he whispered. "I'm here," Ryan said immediately. "I'm not going anywhere." Ethan nodded, eyelids heavy. "I heard a dog," he murmured. "He stayed with me." Ryan swallowed. "He did," he said. "He didn't leave." Down the hall, Karen sat with a paper cup of coffee, hands wrapped around it, though it had long gone cold. Lucy leaned against the wall beside her, Ash lying at her feet. The dog looked exactly as he had all night. Calm, present, unbothered by the tension pulsing through the building. A nurse approached Ryan quietly. "Media's asking for a statement," she said. "Nothing formal, just confirmation." Ryan glanced back at Ethan, then out the door where flashes popped through the glass. "Tell them my son is alive," he said. "That's all." But outside, the story was already taking shape without him. Pitbull saves missing child. Officer defies protocol. Untrained dog succeeds where teams failed. The headlines came with comments, some filled with gratitude and awe, others sharp with accusation, questions about public safety, law enforcement liability, search and rescue standards flooded in. People wanted explanations, someone to praise, someone to blame. By noon, Ryan was called into a quiet conference room near the ER. The search coordinator sat at the table, jaw tight, a county official on speakerphone. "You put a lot of people at risk," the coordinator said. Not unkindly, but firmly. "You went off-grid. You ignored procedure." Ryan didn't argue. "I followed a lead," he said. "It worked." "That's not the point." Ryan met his eyes. "It is to me." The line crackled. "We're reviewing the situation," the county official said. "Given the outcome, there won't be immediate disciplinary action. But this will raise questions." "I expect it will," Ryan replied. The meeting ended without resolution. That seemed to be the theme of the day. Nothing finished. Everything hanging. Back in the hallway, Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor, tracing patterns on Ash's paw with her finger. When she saw Ryan, she stood quickly. "They found him in time," Karen said softly, as if afraid saying it too loudly might undo it. "Barely," Ryan answered. "Another hour, maybe less. Time 200 malms." The thought trailed off, unfinished. A paramedic passed by, paused, and nodded toward Ash. "That dog's something," he said. "We don't always get just in time." Ryan watched Ash as the words sank in. Just in time. Not early. Not safe. Just enough. Outside. The snow began to melt around the edges of the sidewalks. Silver Creek exhaled, relieved. but unsettled. The rescue had saved a life, but it had also cracked something open. A question the town hadn't asked itself before. What if help didn't always look the way they expected? Ryan returned to Ethan's room one last time before nightfall. His son slept peacefully now, color returning to his cheeks. Ryan rested a hand on the bed rail, letting the steady beeping ground him. He thought about the choices he'd made, the rules he'd broken, the voices he'd ignored, and the one he'd finally listened to. Down the hall, Lucy and Ash waited quietly, unnoticed by most. They weren't celebrating. They weren't seeking credit. They were simply there, as they always had been. Silver Creek would debate this for years, over coffee counters and town meetings, on social media and local radio. But Ryan already knew where he stood. Some rescues don't arrive with sirens. Some arrive with 4 paws, a steady nose, and a child brave enough to speak when no one wants to listen. By the 3rd day, the relief had curdled into scrutiny. Silver Creek had always been the kind of town that rallied fast and argued slow. Now it did both at once. The rescue was over. Ethan was alive. And that single fact should have been enough. But it wasn't. Not for the county supervisors fielding calls, not for the regional commanders reviewing reports, and certainly not for the voices online dissecting every decision Ryan Miller had made in the mountains. Ryan sat at the long table in the municipal building, jacket folded over the chair beside him, hands resting flat on the surface. Across from him were 2 officials from the county and a representative from the state task force. Their faces were polite, composed, unreadable. Professional masks Ryan recognized well. "We're not here to punish you," the woman on the right began, pen poised over a legal pad. "But we are obligated to evaluate risk. Allowing a civilian child and an uncertified dog into an active search area raises serious concerns about law enforcement liability." Ryan nodded once. "I understand. Search and rescue protocol exists for a reason," the man beside her added. "You know that. Deviating from it sets a precedent." Ryan leaned back slightly. "With respect," he said, voice steady, "protocol didn't find my son." The room went quiet, not offended, measuring. "The outcome was positive," the woman said carefully. "But outcomes don't retroactively justify methods." Ryan met her gaze. "Sometimes they do." They talked for over an hour. Timelines, weather reports, radio logs, risk assessments. Ryan answered every question honestly, without embellishment. He didn't dramatize the moment he'd chosen to follow Ash into the trees. He didn't minimize the danger. He also didn't apologize. When it was over, the decision was what Ryan had expected. No formal discipline, a written review, and a recommendation that the department clarify boundaries moving forward. In other words, the system would survive, intact, unchanged. Outside, a handful of reporters waited behind a thin rope. Microphones lifted as soon as Ryan stepped into the cold air. "Chief Miller, do you regret breaking protocol?" Was this reckless decision-making? Would you do it again? Ryan stopped. He hadn't planned to speak, but something in the questions, the way they framed the night as a gamble rather than a choice, settled into him. "I'm a police officer," he said clearly. "I believe in rules. They keep people safe. But I'm also a father, and my son was dying out there." A murmur rippled through the group. "When a child told me her dog could help," Ryan continued, "I had two options. Dismiss her because she didn't fit the checklist, or listen, because listening was the only thing left that hadn't failed." "Are you saying anyone should ignore procedure?" a reporter asked. "No," Ryan replied. "I'm saying procedure should never make us deaf." The clip aired that night. It ran between weather updates and an advertisement for home insurance that promised peace of mind. The irony wasn't lost on him. At the hospital, Lucy watched the interview on a muted television in the waiting area. She didn't look proud. She looked uncomfortable. Attention pressed on her in ways she didn't know how to navigate. Ash lay at her feet, head on his paws, eyes half closed but alert to every shift in her breathing. Karen squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "You okay?" Lucy nodded after a moment. "People are loud," she said. "They won't be forever." Lucy glanced down at Ash. "He doesn't care." Ash opened one eye, tail tapping the floor once, as if to confirm the point. That afternoon, Ryan returned to Ethan's room. His son was sitting up now, sipping broth, color steadily returning to his face. "They're talking about you on TV," Ethan said. Ryan smiled faintly. "They talk about a lot of things on TV." Ethan considered that. "They should talk about Ash." Ryan pulled a chair closer. "They probably will." He thought of Lucy then. How easily her voice could have been swallowed by noise. How close he'd come to letting it be. Judgment came fast in places like this. Trust came slower. And sometimes, trust came at a cost no policy could calculate. That evening, as snowmelt trickled along the gutters and the town tried to return to normal, Ryan realized something unsettling and true. Being right didn't protect you from being questioned. It only made the questions louder. And yet, when he closed his eyes, all he could see was a gray dog standing against the wind, refusing to move until someone listened. The small ceremony took place in the lobby of the Silver Creek Police Department, the kind of space usually reserved for paperwork and waiting. Not applause. A borrowed podium stood near the wall, an American flag slightly crooked behind it. Snowmelt dripped from boots as people filtered in. Officers in uniform, a few town officials, neighbors who had brought casseroles earlier in the week and hadn't known what else to bring now. Ash lay at Lucy's feet, calm as ever. Gray coat brushed but still flecked with dried snow. He watched the room the way he watched the forest, quietly, taking it all in. Lucy stood beside him, hands tucked into her sleeves, eyes on the floor. Attention pressed at her from every angle, and she felt it like a weight. Ryan stepped forward when the chief of police nodded to him. His speech was brief. He thanked the search teams. He thanked the medics. He thanked the town. Then he turned to Lucy and Ash. "This department recognizes service," he said, voice steady. "Sometimes that service comes from places we don't expect." A small box was opened. Inside, a simple medallion on a blue ribbon. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would turn the moment into spectacle. When Ryan knelt to place it around Ash's neck, the dog didn't move. He didn't wag. He didn't preen. He accepted it, the way he'd accepted the work, without ceremony. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "I never thought I'd see a pit bull up here." Lucy flinched at the word. Ryan straightened and faced the room again. "This dog didn't save my son because he was lucky," he said. "He did it because he was trained, focused, and trusted, and because a child understood him well enough to speak up." Lucy shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. When a reporter asked how she felt, she answered honestly, "Ash just did his job." "What job is that?" another asked. Lucy looked down at the dog, then back up. "Finding people who are lost." The applause that followed was polite, restrained, uncertain of itself. It felt earned anyway. Later, as the crowd thinned, a man in a county jacket approached Karen with a business card. "Search and rescue consultant," he said. "We've been reviewing the case. Your dog shows unusual aptitude. With formal training, he could qualify for certification. That opens doors, equipment support, search and rescue insurance, proper liability coverage." Karen glanced at Lucy. "We'd need to think about it." The man nodded. "Of course, there's no rush." Lucy waited until he left. "Would Ash still be my dog?" she asked quietly. "Always," Karen said. Lucy considered that, then nodded once. Outside, the wind had died down. The mountains stood clean and bright under a pale winter sun. People stopped Ryan to shake his hand, to thank him, to argue a little less loudly than before. He accepted it all with patience, the patience of someone who knew the conversation wasn't over, just quieter. As Lucy and Ash stepped into the cold, an older woman approached them. "I was wrong about dogs like him," she said softly. "I won't be again." Lucy didn't respond. Ash looked up, tail moving once. That evening, Ryan visited Ethan, strong enough now to sit up and watch television. A local segment replayed the ceremony, followed by an ad promising peace of mind through family insurance plans. Ethan pointed at the screen. "That's Ash." Ryan smiled. "Yeah." "Can he visit?" Ethan asked. Ryan thought of Lucy, of Ash's steady presence, of how close the town had come to missing everything that mattered. "I think that can be arranged." In the quiet that followed, Silver Creek began to see the rescue differently, not as a break from the rules, but as a reminder that help doesn't always arrive with credentials, that courage sometimes looks like listening, and that a dog everyone feared had done exactly what no one else could. The call came 2 weeks later. on a morning when Silver Creek finally looked like itself again. Snow still clung to the higher ridges, but the streets were wet instead of white, and life had resumed its familiar rhythm. School buses, delivery trucks, the quiet routines people leaned on after a scare they didn't want to relive. Karen answered the phone in the kitchen. Lucy sat at the table lining up crayons by color. Ash lay nearby, chin on his paws, ears twitching as Karen's voice changed. Careful, attentive. "Yes," Karen said slowly. "I understand. We'd need to talk it through." She hung up and sat down across from Lucy. "They want Ash evaluated," she said. "Formally. Search and rescue training. The real thing." Lucy didn't look up. "Will it hurt him?" "No," Karen said. "They'd train him the way he already works. They say his nose is exceptional. His focus, too." Lucy finally raised her eyes. "Would I still go with him?" Karen hesitated. "That's the part they're curious about." Ash lifted his head, watching Lucy closely. Later that afternoon, they met Ryan at the edge of town, near the trailhead where the search had begun. Ethan sat bundled in the back of Ryan's truck, cheeks pink, waving enthusiastically when he saw Ash. "That's the dog," Ethan announced. "He stayed with me." Ryan listened as Karen explained the offer: funding, equipment, access to emergency resources small towns rarely had. "It's a big opportunity," Ryan said carefully, "but it's also a big responsibility." Lucy studied the dirt at her feet. "People don't like when I talk," she said. "They don't listen." Ryan crouched to her level. "They listened this time." She shook her head. "They listened to Ash." Ryan considered that. "Maybe," he said. "But Ash listens to you." Lucy looked at the dog. Ash's tail moved once, slow, deliberate. The evaluation took place at a regional training site. Open fields, scent trails laid hours apart, handlers watching quietly from a distance. Ash worked the way he always did, methodical, calm, unaffected by distraction. Lucy stayed close, reading him without words, adjusting when he hesitated, trusting when he surged forward. Afterward, one of the trainers pulled Karen aside. "The dog's natural ability is rare," he said. "But the partnership, that's what makes this work. She understands him in ways we can't teach." "What about her age?" Karen asked. He smiled slightly. "Talent doesn't wait for permission." That night, Lucy lay awake longer than usual, listening to the house settle. Ash slept beside her bed, a steady presence in the dark. She thought about strangers, cameras, questions she didn't know how to answer. She thought about the woods, the cold, and a boy who hadn't been alone, because Ash had found him. "Do you want to help more people?" she whispered. Ash's tail thumped once against the floor. Lucy smiled faintly. In the weeks that followed, Silver Creek adjusted again. Fewer news vans, fewer debates, more quiet curiosity. When people saw Lucy and Ash together, They didn't cross the street anymore. Some nodded. Some asked questions. Some simply watched, seeing something new where they thought they already understood everything. Ryan noticed the change most when it came time to sign the paperwork. Waivers, agreements, lines about liability and training standards. He read every word before adding his signature. "Whatever comes of this," Ryan said, handing the pen back, "you should know you already made a difference." Lucy nodded, accepting the statement without ceremony. As they left the building, Ash paused at the doorway, looking back once, then forward again. The path ahead wasn't familiar. It wasn't safe. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was open. And for the first time since the storm, Silver Creek wasn't just talking about what had happened. It was preparing for what might come next. Spring didn't arrive all at once in Silver Creek. It crept in quietly. Thin ribbons of green along the trails, snow retreating from the south-facing slopes, the creek breaking free from ice with a sound like glass finally exhaling. Life resumed its habits, but something underneath had shifted, subtle and permanent. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. A hiker from out of state hadn't returned from a loop trail that locals rarely worried about. Twisted ankle. No signal. Night coming fast. The county activated a standard response. But this time, there was a pause, just long enough for a question to be asked. "Should we bring Ash?" Lucy stood beside Ryan at the trailhead, hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket. Ash sitting calmly at her left. She wasn't wearing a uniform, just jeans, boots, and a knit hat pulled low. Ash wore a simple working harness. No patches, no fanfare. The answer came quietly. Yes. The trail was older than the town, winding through pine and shale, dropping suddenly into pockets where sound disappeared. Ash worked without urgency, nose low, movements precise. Lucy followed, reading him the way she always had, adjusting her pace when his breathing changed, stopping when his focus sharpened. They found the hiker just before dusk, sitting against a fallen log, pain etched deep into his face, but relief even deeper. "I heard you coming," he said later, voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was done." The second call came weeks later. An elderly man with early dementia wandered from his daughter's house before sunrise. He wasn't dressed for the cold morning air. Time mattered. Ash tracked across damp grass and gravel, past places others would have written off. Lucy stayed close, her presence steady, grounding both the dog and the people watching from a distance. They found the man near the riverbank, confused but unharmed, murmuring to himself. When he looked up and saw Ash, he smiled. "Good dog," he said, as if he'd always known one would come. The third rescue didn't make the news. A teenager ran from home after a fight, angry and scared, convinced no one would come looking. Ash followed the trail through back alleys and tree lines until it ended at a culvert beneath the road. Lucy